Welcome back, guys. This is another episode of Standing on Business. We're here joined today with Dr. Emad Rahim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your story. You have a very interesting background and kind of a process of getting yourself here into this space today. I know everyone has a story, but yours is very unique. Your life story, your early life story. We'd love to just kind of dive into that and what you've learned from life
Mm.
in general.
Yeah, where did I start, man? Wow. So I was born in a concentration camp in the killing fields of Cambodia. My father was executed. I had an older brother that died of starvation and illness in this concentration camp. We spent about 2 years in this concentration camp and eventually escaped and ended up 2 more years in a refugee camp before we made our way to New York State. We ended up in Brooklyn, New York, and this is like the height, like in the 80s. Like this is the height of like when gangs and crack like kind of ruled New York City. I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, and I always say that because I think like when you look at New York today, it was very different from the 80s. Right, like there was no co-ops, right? There was no like Jay-Z and Beyonce didn't have condos,
Yeah.
right? This is like uh, where you if you were from a certain borough, you stayed in that borough. You didn't leave that borough. And as a kid, I was at a block party, and I ended up basically walking into the crossfire of two gang rivals fighting each other, and got shot in the leg. And I think I was. I mean, time is like weird, right? When you're a little kid, but I probably was only in first grade when I got shot in the leg. And that's what brought us to Syracuse, New York, right? And as a kid in Syracuse in the 80s and early 90s, Syracuse was still pretty much segregated, um, lots of issues with poverty. Um, Neighborhoods were like split between different ethnicities, right? Different working class. But I found a community. I found a community predominantly on the west side of Syracuse. See, I always been this ambiguous looking kid. I think I'm still pretty ambiguous looking. A lot of people don't know I'm Cambodian. They often think I'm mixed with something, right? So growing up on the west side meant that most of my friends were Puerto Rican, right? Most of my friends were black, and I had a lot of great like Italian and Irish friends, right? And being that ambiguous looking kid, I got to hear like both sides of these communities, and it allowed me to open up my mind. It allowed me to like be a part of different spaces that maybe someone who's Asian wouldn't be a part of those things, right? Made a lot of great friends, saw a lot of great things and experienced a lot of great things. But also in that mix of chaos, my stepfather was very abusive. I became homeless. I kind of couch surfed as a teenager, and eventually found my way to finding a wonderful mentor that saw something in me that pushed me forward. And I went from this kid that barely graduated high school at Fowler High, um, always 2 grades behind, but like barely graduated Fowler High School to earning 3 PhDs, starting multiple businesses. I'm an equity partner of Intelligent HQ, which is a media company based out in London. I serve as an entrepreneur manager at the Inspire Innovation Hub, which is the largest innovation hub in New York State. We built this here in Syracuse, not in New York City, not in Boston, not in Philly, because there's a lot of amazing things going on here in upstate New York. And I also serve as a endowed chair and a business professor at Bellevue University. Yeah, so that's where I'm at today.
Very
Yeah.
cool. It's very cool seeing like that those the origins and kind of that violent uh start, you could say, of where you came from and to see what you've achieved with your life. Do you find that sometimes seeing that kind of parody and kind of seeing having an appreciation almost in a sense of the opportunities and the peace and the things that are here in the United States as opposed to abroad and somewhere else? Do you find that maybe um, kind of the Western or the American mind is kind of not open to how good we have it here, almost in a sense?
Yeah, I think so. Also, it depends on on your age also, like what generation, are you? Because I think as you get older, you do more reflection, right? You hopefully you traveled more. So if you've been able to travel outside the country, you see how good we have it, right? Or you might compare it to another country. You're like, okay, there's countries in Europe that seem to do it better, right? But if you never left your neighborhood, if you never left your city, it's very difficult to see, you know, uh, what's possible outside of your city, outside of your state, even, right? But to be honest, I didn't do a lot of reflection until I was in my late 30s, right? Because you're always on the grind, right? When
Yeah.
you're in 20s, you're like, I got to do this, I got to do that. You often, when you're in 20s, you might be in college and working at the same time. I was in college working, and I got married at 21, right? And then had a child, like almost a few years after that. So I was always on this grind, always on the hustle, working 3 or 4 jobs. Um, so it wasn't until in my later years when I had the opportunity to take a breather and reflected on my, on my obstacles, on my challenges, but also those accomplishments. And I think that's something that I think all of us could do sooner, right? Take some time to reflect on your past, on your journey, on your accomplishment. Celebrate your wins, but always look at opportunities to grow and move forward.
Yeah. What's the thing that today kind of excites you, gets you up in the morning,
Yeah.
ready to attack the day? What's the kind of the mindset of someone that's an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
what kind of advice could you give someone in that sphere?
Yeah, I see possibilities, right? It's like this idea of seeing the glass half full, half empty. When I was a kid, as I mentioned all those, atrocities and really bad situations I put myself into, and sometimes things I had no control over. I always saw the glass as being half empty, right? But now on this other side, I see the possibilities, right? So what wakes me up every day, what gets me excited, Syracuse, New York is at the cusp of great change. And we can complain about it, or we could be at the forefront of it and take like every opportunity and grasp it,
Absolutely.
right? It's not just Micron. Like we've been talking about Micron over and over again, and it is a game changer, right? But on top of Micron is all those vendors. Like hundreds of companies are moving into Central New York to do business with Micron, right? It's the institutions that are a part of this project. So think of all the graduates at Syracuse University, at Onondaga Community College, at Lemoyne College, right? All these college graduates that once finished school and left and never came back, right? We lost that talent pool.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity to keep that talent now. There's an opportunity for me to be a part of this change and hopefully influence it in a way where my children and grandchildren want to stay in Syracuse and build an amazing life here, right? So when I look at Syracuse right now, I see this as almost like a blank canvas, right? That we have the opportunity to paint the picture that we always wanted to paint, that we knew Syracuse could be this city, right? I see Syracuse as like Seattle. I see Syracuse as Atlanta, in Chicago, but it's in the beginning stage. So we could be proactive and make sure those mistakes that happen in other cities where things got gentrified too quickly, right? Became too expensive and push out the local residents.
Mm-hmm.
We could create policies. We could influence business in a way that makes sense, right? We could influence economic development, growth, and community engagement in a way where it could benefit both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think every business owner that we've had on this podcast so far talks about that same idea, where Syracuse in the past, post-industrial, carrier leaving, etc., kind of sadness almost, in the
Yeah.
sense, this depression, if you will, of the glory days are over. But we are on that. I always like to say that precipice of something great coming, and a lot of us, we like to equate it to Micron. We like to equate it to some of those big projects coming in. Right now, we're doing the big I-81 that's happening, all the construction. We see that new things are popping up in the Inner Harbor, etc. But I think it's also that it comes at a level of the people as well. I think that's where that change comes from. A lot of times, it's very easy to go and just move to a big city because you want to have um, the amenities, if you will, the of what a ton of people in a densely populated area gets you. You know, all the food, all the social opportunities, the culture, etc. But we have an ability to make that happen here in Syracuse.
Exactly.
And what would you say to someone that's kind of like, okay, what's the point of sticking around? What's the indicators, almost in a sense, that this is going to happen? This isn't going to just be another kind of a smoke show, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because we're at the forefront, you know the direction it's moving towards, right? Versus being in a city where everything is already created, everything is already laid down, right? So you don't have no influence over that. Right now, there's tons of meetings happening throughout the city. There's tons of programs like workforce development, getting people trained for trades, right? There's tons of education programs at universities, at community colleges, even at trade schools, preparing for this next workforce, whether it's Micron, whether it's I-81, right? Whether it's all these apartments that are being built left and right, right? So instead of going into a city and just following, right, that process, following that basically doing business as is, right? You have the ability and opportunity, right, to be at the forefront of change and influence change in a way where it benefits not just you right now, but the generations of your families and friends that are right after you, right? When we talk about generational wealth a lot. You know, I
Hmm.
see it a lot in social media. I see a lot of in conversations. This is where generational wealth happens, right? Like you have the ability to engage in political conversation in the beginning stage. You have the ability to engage in economic and education reform in the beginning stage. That really happens, right? We don't see that happening in a lot of cities right now.
Yeah.
Usually, the city has always established its leaders and its directions, and you basically just follow along.
What's some tangible ways that someone could be an active participant in these reforms and policy changes? What's the way that they, get their hands involved in the process?
That's a great question. Let me give you an example, right? So I lived in New York City. I also lived in Chicago, right? I was in Chicago, I think, 4 years. I was a dean at a university there. I was there for 4 years. I've never met the mayor. I've never met my congressional representative. I never even met the local, I forgot what they call it, like alderman, which is basically, I think, your common councilor, right? In Syracuse, coming back, met Ben Walsh just like that, right? Coming back, met my common councilor, right? Senator Rachel May is always walking around downtown, right? Congressman Mannion is always walking around. Like these people are very approachable, very engaged, and want to know what's happening. They have open forums. They have volunteer groups. They have surveys, questionnaires that you can engage in, right? Senate State CEO is always doing public workshops, public forums, right? Even the local universities. You go to University of Chicago, for example, right? They have programs, but only professors, universities, and certain people invited on campus. It's not often a public offering, right? Syracuse, Lemoyne, Syracuse, Lemoyne College, Onondaga Community College have tons of these open forums that talks about things like advanced manufacturing, semiconductors. Uh, the drone industry is growing like crazy here. Like you don't need to leave Syracuse to engage in the drone industry. It's happening now. And they have tons of programs. Erie 21 at Lemoyne College is a program that is providing the next generation of youth, like the opportunities that exist, that providing training, education, workforce opportunities, right? Another community college have these advanced manufacturing certificates, right? So if you want to get into a new trade, you don't have to wait 2 years. These are like 6 month, 8 month certificates, right? There are workforce trainings happening at On-Ramp, Jubilee Homes, EOC. So you can't say there's nothing happening. These things are available. You just have to take the step forward and engage in it. Most of them are free. If not free, there's often some type of scholarships, right? Some type of grants attached to it. You just have to ask and go through that process of learning and growing.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people want to blame the community for, or the, blame the city, blame, our region here. Oh, we don't have this, we don't have that, but nobody wants to take and kind of, as metaphorically, pick up the shovel and
Yeah.
be part of building that community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's some a lesson that you've learned from your your upbringing, your past, and some kind of from the experience of this is a tangible thing that every business owner, every entrepreneur needs to know, that I learned either through pain or through trials, or one way or another, but this is something that everyone needs to know.
Yeah. You can't influence change being on the sideline. A lot of people on the sideline, they're watching things happen. They're watching all of these opportunities pass them by, and they complain or they reflect on it. They're not taking advantage of the opportunity. They often are waiting for something to happen, right? They're waiting for somebody to invite them, right? You know, several years ago, I was a part of this group. It's a mastermind group called Profound, right? Profound had a lot of influential people from Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, but we also had people from Florida, founded by three amazing people. In addition to Adam Weitzman, who's like the billionaire locally, right? Jeff Knaus, who is an amazing entrepreneur, and Orel Moody, who's an international speaker and entrepreneur. And what I find, in regards to like the characteristics of all these amazing people, because these are like, people at the top of real estate, people at the top of entrepreneurship, people at the top of like financial and investment planning and business services and those type of things, right? They don't wait on the sideline. They're always making deals. They're always looking for opportunities. They're always having conversations, right? And I find these conversations very like open, very organic, right? Not everything has to be strategic with clear purpose. Sometimes you listen to conversations and you figure out like, how can I fit in? How can I support this? How can I engage in this? Right? And then instead of waiting for like, oh, a grant shows up, or waiting for, oh, the mayor says I could do this, right? You have to figure out like, where does my talent lie in, and how could I push this button forward? Whether it's me joining, a program to get a certificate or the certification, or me engaging in this community initiative so I can have some influence over this job, or over this program moving into Syracuse and so forth, right? So I find there's a lot of people staying on the sideline, and you have to like move forward. You can't be an introvert. I grew up as an introvert, right? You can't be an introvert and be in this space and wait for change to come to you. You have to like step outside that comfort zone and fight that introvert like pressure, right? And kind of like push your fears aside, fight your fears, and move forward to influence those things that help your community, help your career, and drive your aspirations forward.
What would you say to somebody that could say, why do I need to do all this? Why can't I just focus on doing my job, for example, if I have a business doing a specific thing, and just focus on being the best? Or do you find that it's impossible necessarily to have a business grow, to have an organization or a movement grow without having that connection?
I don't think it's impossible. I mean, there's tons of examples of where someone was like the best at what they do. They kind of put their heads down and they just went at it, right? But someone discovered them,
Hmm.
right? Someone came to your restaurant and was like, "This is amazing," and that person happened to be the voice of the media that promotes restaurant, cuisine, right? Someone saw your talent and hired you as a chef. But that doesn't always happen. There's a lot of great restaurants that go out of business and had amazing food, but no one ever tasted,
Yeah.
right? There's amazing business owners that do like specialized things, whether they write books, whether they provide like some type of consulting services that go out of business, but they were amazing at what they did, but no one heard of them because they didn't know how to advocate for themselves, right? They were stuck in their bubble,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes someone do discovers you, but the chances of you becoming successful in your specialization increases when you're able to advocate for yourself and promote yourself.
Yeah. What's the kind of, you said you were an introvert and had to learn to
Yeah,
overcome and,
yeah.
and be able to communicate and network with people. what good advice could you give somebody when it comes to, hey, I need to be present in the room, and I need to be able to, leverage these situations and opportunities to, grow myself. How do you get out of your shell, if you will?
Yeah. I would start off with finding people that do things that you enjoy, whether it's joining a running club, right, and being more social around those people that have common interests,
Mm-hmm.
and that allows you to do a few public speaking engagements within that circle, within that bubble. If you love comic books, right, if you love Pokemon, go to those Comic Cons, right? Go to those after hours meetups where you're meeting new people, engaging conversations. That is within your comfort zone. Once you do a few of those and you get more comfortable, now step out, right? Now look for other like business chapters and meetups and community initiatives and engagements and those type of programs that are not necessarily in your specialization, right? But allows you to engage, allow you to have conversations, hear what's happening, and figure out like what is my place in this. And sometimes you're not the one that speaks out. Sometimes you're not the one that is at the forefront. Maybe you're the one who basically does all of the behind the scenes, type of movement, type of programs. It's perfectly fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those people, their names are still out there. People know them. People know their contributions. People know how relevant they are in that industry, in that specialization, and so forth. But you have to step outside that comfort zone, right? Or you're going to be stuck in that bubble, and that bubble becomes smaller and smaller because as Syracuse gets bigger, that bubble you have becomes smaller and smaller.
Yeah, because the environment just continues becoming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to kind of getting out of your comfort zone and networking out, how do you approach the initial kind of process of, hey, I met somebody brand new and I want to, many times people say, offer somebody something before you ask of anything, other people. What's your kind of philosophy on creating relationships and being in synchrony with people and making making things happen not only for yourself but for your community?
Yeah, yeah. I love this question. So I always want to distinguish between um, taking advantage of an opportunity and becoming an versus being an opportunist,
Hmm.
right? And the reason why I want to highlight the difference between the two because a lot of people are networking or they think they're networking, but they're really becoming an opportunist. Like they're jumping into conversations and they're not listening, right? They really want to say, I'm selling myself, I'm selling my product, I'm selling my services. And now this conversation is moving in towards being more of like you being more of an opportunist. And no one likes that, right? So when you have these conversations with people, it's important to listen, right? It's important to listen, learn about that person, learn about what they do, learn about their interests, right? And then wait for your turn. And then you share that part of yourself, right? Then you find common interests, right? Then you find out like, hey, let's figure out what you and I can do together and move this forward, right? Um, so I'm in this weird like like um like age, right? I want to because I turned 48, so I'm moving towards 50,
Hmm.
right? And I get a lot of young people asking me to be their mentors, right? And it's very flattering, right? But I remember this young person who approached me and they were like, hey, I follow you. I read your book. I find your stuff very inspiring. I would love to have coffee with you and kind of, figure out, what we could do together. And I was like, cool, great, right? We did that. And the entire time, the entire time we were in that coffee shop, this person was just talking about themselves
Hmm.
and then asking for a job, right? So it's very transactional, right? There was no growth. Being a mentor means you are trying to grow like as a person, right? You find that there are gaps in that growth, and you're looking for someone to help push you forward, to help educate you, right? To help coach you, right? But this person was looking really for an opportunity,
Hmm.
right? So if you want to like seize like the moment and really grow those make sure your space is expanding versus getting smaller. You have to engage in more meaningful conversations, but take the time to listen to people, right? And figure out the role you could play, right, in this movement, in this program, in this service, in this opportunity, versus you trying to take advantage of the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When it comes to, but at the same time, when it comes to seeing opportunity, what's the way to go about seizing an
Mm,
opportunity? You don't want an opportunity to
yeah.
pass you by.
No, definitely, definitely. I think first it's just introducing yourself, right? If you see a person speaking on something you're very interested in, right? You introduce yourself, right? You do some homework on them, so you kind of summarize what you know about them, right? And take that moment to exchange business cards because they probably have to move on to the next conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes people get anxious and they take up all that person's time, and that annoys everybody,
Yep.
right? But if you go there with a purpose and you say, hey, I heard what you said. I'm very inspired. I would like to learn more about this. Can we have coffee? Can we meet up sometime, right? And oftentimes, if that person is genuine, they're like, yeah, let's make it happen, right? But you got to do your homework, right? So if you know that there's this person that you've been following, that you read about, and they're speaking, at a local college that you can participate in, that you can attend, or a local city program, take that opportunity to do your homework, figure out how you're going to approach this person, right? And how are you going to continue this conversation, right? Instead of like jumping on them and then trying to get something out of it. You don't want to be transactional, right? Let me give you an example, right? So many years ago, and it feels like it's forever right now, when X was Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a guy named Dennis. I don't have permission to put his last name, so I just say Dennis, right? Dennis had this media company. Um, I didn't know how big the media company was, but he had asked a question. He goes, "Well, universities have ranking systems, right? And that's how universities promote their degree programs, right? So you as a student would more likely go to this NBA program versus this other NBA program because of the ranking,
Ranking. Yep.
right? So he's saying, well, should that ranking system change? That's all he asked. And a lot of people were responding to this question. And I looked at those responses and I was reading them and I was liking them or not, responding to them. And then I DM him and I said, hey, I saw what you posted. I think this is an important topic, but this is how I would do it, right? And I talked about creating a new ranking where it's based on social media footprint. I said, this is where students are going, this is where professors are going, right? So I think if we want to say a university has a degree program that's better than another degree program, we should rank them based on their social media footprint. And he goes, how would you do this? I don't have a media background, but I know my data, right? I know certain things because I was a former dean of a university and I go to these conferences. So I said I would create a heat map, and this heat map would capture certain algorithms, certain hashtags, and I put this stuff out there. And right after that, he said we need to speak, right? So, but going forward, basically we had conversations and conversations, and then eventually he offered me 12% in his media company, right? I didn't ask for anything, right? We didn't have any conversation about money, right? About intellectual property, about copyright. It was just me excited over this topic and him responding in a way that, hey, I'm interested, right? And that created an opportunity for both of us going forward, right? But oftentimes people are waiting waiting on the sideline and then jump on something. And then when they jump on something, there's often a transactional dollar amount tied to that. And I don't know you yet. I don't know what you bring to the table. We don't have a real relationship yet. So to talk about a dollar amount, right? That is a customer and retailer relationship, and that's not genuine,
Yeah.
right? So you have to figure out where you want this relationship to go and how do you want to approach it, right?
For someone that's starting out and they're hungry,
Yeah,
they're I don't want to you go to the point of starving. Someone that's like they're still kind of in the struggle, the cuts, the early grind where they're working and working. Um, it's almost kind of like that. idea that, when you're physically starving, it's not good to go and eat, a huge meal right away.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's kind of that you kind of need to, get into something, get your system going, almost in a way, to get the body acclimated to food again. Um, for someone that's, still in that hunger, that struggle, and for them, they just see an opportunity and they want to pounce on it. They
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to just get into it. What would be the advice that you'd give them?
Take bite size. Right? Right? You're not seizing that opportunity based on what's in front of you, but you're looking at the future of where this relationship could go, right? And what makes sense, right? So let me approach it from this angle versus approaching it from every angle,
Yeah.
right? So what is the angle that generates like the strongest impact, right? So let's say you meet this person and you're interested in having a conversation that continues because you see it benefiting you, but you haven't even thought about how it's going to benefit them,
Hmm.
right? So do some homework on them, right? And let's say you did some homework and you realize, oh, this person loves boxing, right? So instead of just focusing on their business and the opportunity that could it could create for you and your business, is let's have a conversation about boxing because I know this person loves boxing, and that person could take like hours talking about boxing, right? So instead of creating like a moment in time that may not go your way, create a moment in time that goes their way.
Hmm.
And that could lead to more possibilities because now they find like, oh, you have a common interest, right? You obviously did homework on me.
Yeah.
So I need to do some homework on you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have the SALT framework that
Yeah.
you've talked about. Can you give us a little bit background of how you developed that, and
Yeah.
what that means to you?
The SALT framework came by accident, right? It was not really planned. I was writing a book. One of my mentors, Dr. Casey Reason, out of Arizona, wrote tons of leadership books. So I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm writing this book. I'm trying to figure out how to format it and structure. I don't know if it should be a memoir, a biography. I'm just lost here, but I know the direction I want to go. So he flew me out to Arizona. I spent 2 weeks with him, and we had like this vision board. We had these like great, like intense discussions around it. And as we were talking, the word survival came out. He's like, yo, you're survival. You're a survivor. You had a survival mentality that pushed you forward. And we kind of talked about that over and over again. We're like, but survival mentality will only get you so far, right? And we're like, what got you to this next stage? And I was like, oh, adapting, right? Adapting like my surroundings. And as the surroundings change, I adapt to the next surrounding, right? And we went on that. And the next one, we're like, well, if we're adapting, right, and we're no longer in survival mode, how do we how do we how do we move on to the next like stage? Is there a next stage? Of course, there's always a next stage, right? And then the next stage, I was like, well, before we move on to the next stage, right, we have to figure out like what is needed, right? Like who do I who do I have around me, right? Who are those people that could support me and push me forward? And that's when love came into this conversation, right? And then afterwards, it's like we want to transform ourselves to the next person, to the next career, to the next whatever, right? So that became survival, adapting, love, and transformation, right? But it happened to be SALT, right? And SALT is an acronym that we have always used to like I not acronym, but I mean it's my acronym, but SALT has always been this like phrase we use for Syracuse, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Salt City because of
Yeah.
our history.
Yeah.
So when we looked at it, it's like this is salt. Oh, I'm from Syracuse, Salt City. But then also, salt is a preservative. As someone that survived the killing fields of Cambodia, my mother talked about salting our meat, right? Because we didn't have refrigerators and we're in the middle of the jungle. So you have to salt things in order to stay alive. So that word salt also is a way to keep us alive, right? So I wrote the book, and the book is resilience from the boardroom, from the killing fields to the boardroom, the SALT effect. And I broke up each chapters using this acronym, right? And it's almost like a journal. Like if you're in survival mode, let's talk about it. Let's get you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're adapting. Great, wonderful. What are your tools? What are your techniques, right? But let's move out of this, right? but who do you need around you? Who's your partner? Who's your business partner? Who's your husband? Who's your wife? Who are those people that you should have by your side that you know will push you forward when you're ready to give up? Because there are always those situations and always those circumstances when we're ready to give up. And we need those people to push us forward. We need those people to give us tough love, right? And then once we have that foundation and we're a lot more stable and we have clarity, now we need to transform ourselves to the person we're supposed to be. What does that look like? Do I need more degrees? Do I need to be a part of certain spaces? Do I need to relocate? Do I need to change my business strategy? Right? And then that transformation keep on going, right? It doesn't need to end, right? So you
Yeah.
could use SALT as a kid in elementary school struggling with these things, or you could be on a high-level career track as an executive struggling with other things.
Yeah. Kind of talk to me about the process of writing a book.
Mm.
Maybe for someone, we'd like to always on our podcast, we'd like to be able to relate to people that are maybe like exactly like you said, someone that's young, that's beginning their business journey, their career, or maybe someone that's already been an entrepreneur for a while and has a business. And what would you say to someone that has experienced life, has an interesting, unique story or a perspective, and the process of putting that to ink,
Okay.
putting that to paper? What was the process looking like for you?
So I come from an academic background, right? As I mentioned, I have a PhD and I teach at a university. That level of writing is very different than the book
Hmm.
itself. So I had to like break out like that way of writing
Yep.
because that way of writing wouldn't have worked. So I had to retrain myself. What was amazing, and I think something that we are not taught in literature school, right, is a vision board, right? When I went to is it, I think it's outside of Phoenix, Arizona. I think it's Prescott or something like that, Arizona. Dr. Casey Reason had created a vision board. So instead of me being frustrated over words, and I'm dyslexic, so imagine me trying to write and
Yeah.
can't even read my own damn handwriting, right? We created a vision board, and that vision board allowed me to see all these pieces of my life. And then I could organize it and coordinate it in a way that tells the story I want, right? When you go to like a traditional like writing workshop, they often talk about, oh, you need your introduction, right? Then you need the meat of the story. Then you need a conclusion, right? All books kind of have that same stuff. But that's very, like that put things in sequence. But our life is never really in sequence like that, right? And sometimes you spend a lot of time writing something just to throw it away because it doesn't fit. But if you put your life in a vision board where you can see images, places, dates, now you could figure out like what should comes first. Where do I want to focus my energy on? What's more powerful? What makes sense in regards to a conclusion and what makes sense for an introduction,
Yep.
right? Right. So yeah, I would definitely say, look at the vision board approach. It's less frustrating and it's more engaging and more powerful because also with a vision board, it's not like a manuscript where you write a manuscript and you ask people to read it. If you create this big vision board, now you can invite other people, take a look at it and tell me what you see, right? What's missing in here? And then other people can contribute to that. And that's what Dr. Casey Reason did. When we put all these pictures, dates, places on the wall, he was able to say, well, let's look at it from this way. Let's erase this because this seems to be all over the place, or this doesn't really connect, right?
For someone that might say, or I guess the question I have for you is, what was the thing that kind of like, okay, I need to write this down for some, and the context being for someone that's saying like, oh, I don't really know if I have a story worth telling.
Mm.
What would you say to that person?
I think we all have stories, right? But some people are more powerful storytellers than others, right? I mean, I've read some amazing stories that in the context of like their journey, it was good. It wasn't great, but they were great like storytellers, right? And then I read some books that never made on the New York Times, but it was like heart-wrenching,
Yeah.
right? Took you on an emotional roller coaster and you felt their pain, but they were not good storytellers. right? So when you are trying to figure out like what should I include, where should I go in this book, talk to the people around you first, right? Share some ideas, right? Get their opinions, right? And sometimes not just maybe not just your people that are close friends and family because they know you very well, but sometimes even strangers. Just like whether your teacher, I would talk to my students, right? If you were working at a company, like, hey, take some colleagues out and let's talk about this. Um, but yeah, but figure out who your audience is, and your audience will tell you what makes sense in regards to the books they write, what captures their attention, right? What draws like their interests, right? And that tells you like where I should move towards, where should I focus my writing, my time, my resources in. Yeah.
Yeah. To kind of begin closing this out here, I know that the Inspire Hub is very important to you. Can you give us a little bit about why that's such a crucial key element that we should, pay attention to, especially as business owners here in the Central New York
Mm-hmm.
region?
So as a kid, I remember walking around downtown and always, I love architecture. I always been this kid that just loved buildings, right? And I would look at buildings and wonder what the hell's going on in that building, right? And then you realize you're not invited to go in that building. Like no one knows you. Like you're a kid. Like what are you doing? You can't come into this building.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, it's the same thing, right? And that's how we lose people. I think when people feel like nothing's happening in Syracuse, they leave Syracuse, right? Sometimes we are the best naysayer of our city,
Yep.
right? Like you meet somebody, like you have friends that went to school with you,
Yep.
you went to college with these guys, and they're like, yo, Syracuse sucks, right? I can't wait to leave Syracuse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I used to be one of those guys where I'm like, I can't wait to leave Syracuse. I went to Chicago and I came back. And you know what's funny? Now I meet people that came back. They're my age or they're younger. They went to Atlanta. They went to Miami, but they came back. And there's a reason why they came back. Sometimes it's affordability. Sometimes it's family related, right? They have kids and now they want to be close to their parents, for grandkids and so forth, right? They want to buy a house, right? Or their job relocated. Or during COVID, a lot of people jobs became remote, and they're like, hey, my money could stretch more, right, in Syracuse than it could in Atlanta, right? But when it comes to like opportunities, we have to create space where people see possibilities. And that's what the Innovation Inspire Hub does, right? The Inspire Innovation Hub creates that possibility where you can come into this building and you see like drone companies from all over the world at Genius New York. You see clean tech companies in my accelerator, right? You see small businesses. You walk into the co-working space and you see like entrepreneurs having conversations and creating business deals, right? This space also is allowing students in our city school districts to come in and have these conversations, learn from entrepreneurs, ask questions, participate in business pitch competitions, right? Those buildings are important to me, right? Because it says, hey, things are happening and you're invited, right? You go across the street from the Inspire building, we have the Salt Market, right? And then you go to the Salt Market and you're seeing like small restaurants that will eventually, hopefully, become big restaurants later on, right? And then we have people from all over the city in that space having conversations, watching soccer matches, and having dinner, lunch together, and so forth, right? That's why the space is important because it creates community. It's letting us see the possibilities. It's allowing us to engage in those possibilities because we have free workshops, we have free programs, we have business advisors, we have boot camps. All these things exist in this space, right? And the future the future has the potential to create more spaces like this, right? And we need more people to engage in those conversations to figure out like what spaces are necessary, right? What spaces make sense for each of the generations that are trying to find like like their purpose in our community, right? Whether it's something focused on nonprofit, social impact, retail, right? Service industry, there should be a space for all those things. But we won't know until people engage in those conversations.
Yeah. If we were to distill Dr. Rahim's existence,
Uh,
we always like to ask this question to conclude our podcast. Our podcast is called Standing on Business,
okay.
which means what is the core principle, the core, if someone were to say, this is what I'm standing on, this is the business I stand on, what would be your, what would be the thing that you stand on?
Impact, right? It's all about social impact now, right? I'm not looking at the opportunities I create for myself, but I'm looking at opportunities I create for others, right? Because it's weird, man. At this age, I'm always reflecting at my contributions to society, right? Not how much money I made, not how many degrees I earn, but the type of influence I have in helping to make someone's life more meaningful, right? So I stand on impact, right? And making sure that I create a space that allows other people to figure out how they can make impact. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
It was my pleasure.
It's been an absolute honor. Guys, this has been another wonderful episode of Standing on Business. If you're a business owner, a organization leader, someone here in the central New York area, and you have a story to tell, which we all do have a story to tell, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you on. Please feel free to share on all podcast platforms, and we'll see you guys on the next one.